listen, never in my life associated the word boring with baseball.
We know what's up.
Me? Yeah. Famous? Yeah.
And I'm like giddy over there smiling like, we're about to win this shit.
Did everyone give you crap? Give me a good host story.
I'm not picking it up.
We both love the game.
We talk about it every day.
Getting on baseball.
Having some popcorn, you're fooling around your phone.
I'd have to wait in line for 3 hours.
Hang on, because it's about to be a wild ride.
All right, Adam Ottavino, what do I say? What do I say right now?
Yeah, that there's nobody you'd rather be talking to.
But it's true. It's true. Thank you.
There's nobody I'd rather be talking to, so this feels good.
Oh, man. So that's what I was fishing for. So Adam Ottavino, so obviously you've been on a couple times. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate everything that you do for the game of baseball. Always enjoy the conversations. And I'm not just, and there's nobody I'd rather be talking to right now. And what we're going to get to, Adam, is, we're coming to the conclusion here of a calendar year. Science would suggest that's the case. And I love the what has happened and what's going to happen talk, know? And I feel like you're the perfect person to have these sort of conversations, because we've already, I think that we got together. Well, Julian interviewed you September, and it was as good as it was the conversation after about pitching and everything else, and then we talked during the postseason, all of it. Anyway, I'm wasting a lot of time just reflecting and saying how awesome you are. So thank you.
I appreciate it. I had a good time talking with you guys.
So first of all, before I forget, I didn't want to forget this. I saw another number 0 has popped up. Did you see this?
Is it Walker Buehler?
Walker Buehler, yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah.
Yeah. Does he owe you $5?
I mean, I was the first pitcher, so maybe, but I wasn't the first number 0, so it's hard to take full ownership of it.
But the first pitcher, right? First pitcher?
Yeah, first pitcher. Yeah.
And you probably told this story before, but again, it's a top of mind for me. Why did it start? Why did it continue? Why does it continue? What is the impetus for it?
Yeah, it's something that started all the way back at Little League, just looking for a number with significance. My dad suggested wearing the 0 because it looked like an O for Ottavino. And I've just been wearing it ever since. There's been some gaps there where the team didn't have a number 0 jersey, like when I was in college, or with the Cardinals, they would never let me have it. But once I made the team out of spring training, I think it was 2013 with the Rockies, they let me switch to 0. It's just a number I've been comfortable with, and I've been riding it ever since.
Can I ask you, with all due respect to the fine organization of the St. Louis Cardinals, why wouldn't they let you have 0?
Honestly, they didn't like me at all. I mean, I feel like if a more established player would have asked for it, they probably would have given it. But at the time, I was kind of an emergency call-up guy because Kyle Loesch was injured, had to make a couple starts. My time with the Cardinals was not anything really to write home about. I pitched poorly. I didn't even have a parking spot in the player parking lot. They told me there wasn't any spots. So there were some things there that left me with a sour taste in my mouth. Number 0 wasn't even on the table.
I mean, the good thing though is that when you go to a team, it's not like you don't have to do you don't have to give anyone a Porsche, I guess is what I'm saying. You probably never butted up against anyone and said, hey, you know what? I really want 0. Can you give me 0? Like, you've never had that happen.
No, every team I've gone to didn't have one at the moment. So it will be interesting if I sign somewhere and somebody has it, how that'll play out. If I want to do anything about it. I mean, I don't know. We'll see.
Wow. Is that a hint?
No hint. No hint, but there's some 0s around the league. I mean, Jack Flaherty was wearing it last year. Obviously Stroman and a couple others. And now looks like Mr. Buehler. So
yeah, I love, I listen, it's a powerful number. Like, that's the thing. I think it's great. And I just wanted to reflect on it. I didn't realize that all of that backstory. So that's awesome. So again, before we get to sort of the meat and potatoes, I don't I also want to give you the opportunity to say, hey, how you doing? What's going on? I was looking at, you ever heard of a thing called baseball reference? Baseball reference, yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. But I was like, you have had, other than 2020, you've
Yeah.
had a great run. And I know this isn't like the be all end all, but a great run of 60 appearance seasons. And for me, Adam, I look at, for position players, this is a soapbox that I got on last year, is saying how games played, I think, is for position players is one of the most underrated stats. But I think that also should be factored in. I don't know if you knew that. I think you landed just at 60 this year, not including postseason, but just at 60.
I'm very aware of it. I even pitched both games on the last day of the season this year in that doubleheader in Atlanta to get to the number. I have no problem getting there. I mean, I haven't spent a day on the disabled list since 2018. So typically it's pretty easy for me to get 60. This year, my appearances were definitely more scarce, but I was able to push through and get there at the end and keep the streak alive. And I mean, yeah, it's something I'm definitely aware of, something you take pride of as a guy, as a relief guy, is just posting and being available for your guys and, pitching as many games as possible.
So you go into that last, do you say you want to pitch? Do you say, hey, listen, I don't want to say that I want to pitch both ends of this doubleheader, but it wouldn't hurt, Carlos. Can we do this?
Well, to be honest, I had kind of given up on it a little bit. Obviously, those were big games that last day. And the first game, I only got in that game because we were trailing. We were down like 3-1 when I went into the game. Through a scoreless inning, and then we ended up making a comeback, taking the lead, and the game went kind of haywire from there. That was the game where they came back on Diaz, and then Lindor homered off Iglesias, and we ended up clinching the playoffs that day. And then we had a second game to play. So now all of a sudden the opportunity was there, because now they didn't want to pitch a lot of the guys that they were trusting in the leverage spots in the second game because the playoffs were starting one day later. So that's when I went to Miss Mendoza and I told him, I would love to pitch in this game. And he was like, are you sure? And I was like, listen, like I'm at 59 appearances. I know it doesn't mean anything to anybody else, but it would mean something to me if I pitch one more time. And, he was nice enough to put me in there and, had another good inning and got out of there feeling good about it.
That's awesome. That's great. I mean, that's, again, I'm two questions that I'm glad I asked, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's the fact that it's important, because I do feel like, and I know it's not apples to apples with position players, but I do feel like this should be a thing. And this is if we want to use this as the jumping off point, the t-shirt cannon for your free agency, fine. I'm all for it. I know how valuable you are to teams, and I don't know how you have earned the right to have to say, hey, listen, this is what I can do, but I think you hit the nail on the head. For relief pitchers, if you're pitching 60 games, like, number one, you're reliable. Number two, you're not hurt, and if you are hurt, you're powering through. Number three, you're good. So there,
yeah,
it's a good stat.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I take a lot of pride in that. I've led my team in appearances like 6 or 7 playoff seasons. So, for me, that equates to being a valuable guy that pushed us across the line and got us into those important games. So at a certain point in my career, I was tired of being beat up, and I, really, really decided to prioritize that part of things, the health part. And, I've gotten really good at that. So that's, if anything, I think that's something that, I've borderline mastered at this point. And it's crazy because everybody else seems to have a really hard time staying healthy. But that's something that, I've been really, really excited that I've been able to be out there and be on the field. Because at the end of the day, I want to play as much as possible. I love pitching, and it stinks to be on the sideline watching other guys doing it. So it's been really cool the last 6-7 years to be out there, as much as anybody.
Well, that's honestly, Adam, that's one of the things that we talked about, I think, in the dugout that day, was the dynamic of how so many pitchers are, especially relievers, are being carted out there, and you have to impress, and you have to show your best stuff. And it's like a constant sprint instead of, all right, this is a marathon. And the way baseball has changed in that respect, and it helps. Listen, it helps if you're a veteran. It helps that you have some sort of track record, but it is another example that teams pay attention to what you're saying. Hey, let's just not make this run out to the bullpen and start yanking sweepers without doing it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately the incentives that exist within the game are kind of out of balance with staying healthy. Especially as a younger player, you really have to prioritize performance and strikeouts and pure power and stuff and all that type of thing to get noticed and to get yourself in the position you want to be in. I think as you get older, you look around and you see all the carcasses of the pitchers kind of laying around and the guys that were super nasty that are out of the game, and you don't want to be one of those guys. You want to be somebody that plays a long time. And for me, my dream was to play all the way to 40, and so I had to look in the mirror at some point and say I got to make some adjustments here. And so I started prioritizing health. Obviously you don't want your performance to dip too much, but I really decided that me being healthy was kind of the number one priority. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't get in the position to have that luxury of prioritizing that. I think
was that like a tangible thing, like the 40? Because I think going back to Baseball Reference, it says you're 39. So was the 40 was always sort of the, and who's to say how long it is, but 40 was a very real. I want to get to this point.
I don't think it was ever really real. It's just something that me and my father had spoke about when I was young, like what does it mean to be a big leaguer? I mean, it's one thing to get a cup of coffee. It's another thing to make it to arbitration and hit some of these artificial marks. 10 years is obviously a big deal. That was something that was always in the back of my mind. But for me, like what would make me feel like I had the experience I wanted and, live the life I wanted was just to be in it for a really long period of time. And, being signed at 20 years old, to look at it from at that point and say, oh, I'm going to play 20 years of baseball, that's kind of crazy. But, if you take it 1 year at a time, that was kind of the end goal, that if everything went right, that we hoped for. And, we're pushing right up on it now. So it's been a great ride. I can't complain about it. Yeah.
So what's the ride look like? You've couple last off seasons. I think you signed on December 27th, 1 year. Last year you signed in January. Every off season's different. It is what it is. I mean, you've gone through all different iterations of off seasons.
Yeah.
How do you feel about this one so far?
Well, I've got some interest, but that's about it. I've just gotten those interest calls. The relief market really hasn't the dam hasn't broken. I'm not really sure where I stand in the pecking order with certain teams. But I think having been through it and having, now the understanding that you can't really force the market and things are going to happen the way that they happen, I've been a lot more at peace this year. I've been able to just do my training and kind of put where I'm going to play and all those types of thoughts kind of off to the side. I'm going to play this year. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get a job. So I'm just, going business as usual, and we'll let that stuff take care of itself.
Yeah, good for you, man. Like that's the thing, is that to be at peace, because it's going to work out. Like we've already gone through the reasons why it's going to work out. But it is every off. We've ridden this roller coaster of off season so much. You're going back to the lockout year, the lockout was terrible. The deadlines were awesome in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
For our purposes, I don't know, but this is, and then when we get into this off season and it's like Soto signed, here it comes, here we go, and then sad trombone. So I don't know, like
it's just the teams hold all the cards. Like you can't force them to give you offers, and things are going to play out the way they do. It's a musical chairs situation unless you're really the top dog. So I mean, just having gone through that, and stressing over it in past off seasons, I don't want to feel that stress. It doesn't really matter yet. It'll be what it'll be, and I have other things to focus on. So I'm just going to focus on those.
Yeah, well, this is the here and the now is a great thing to focus on, and this is a good time to do that because this is a podcast and it's the here and the now. and your excellence here is much appreciated. I do want to. Were you surprised by the Met Soto thing? Again, it's just top of mind thing.
I wasn't. No, I wasn't. Honestly, like the Mets are in a very unique position. They're building something big. There's nothing going to stop them from being one of the top franchises in the game. Obviously, Steve and Alex, who run the team, have deep pockets. I knew that if this was a player that they wanted, that they were probably going to have the highest bid, and that is the way it ended up playing out. I think they have the best of both worlds. They have David Stearns in there who's winning, trying to help them win on the margins, and then they have the ability to whip people with their checkbook as well. So
can I ask you this? One of the dynamics that came up in the Soto conversations was club. For instance, I know that the Red Sox, one of their pitches was, "You can be the guy. You're the guy, right?" You go to the Yankees, it's Judge. You go to the Mets, as Lindor. But you were in the middle of the Mets clubhouse, and it's like, what is that dynamic like? What do you think? Is that a thing? In other words, I can't imagine Francisco Lindor say, "Hey, Juan, step aside. I'm the leader of this clubhouse." I can't imagine that it's anything like that, right?
No, I mean, honestly, I've been there the last 3 years. Mets have had a really good clubhouse. I would say between Francisco, Nimmo, those two in particular really stand out as kind of like the main leaders of the team the past couple years. But they're very inclusive types of people. They gave everybody a chance to speak throughout the years. And honestly, like, I think, Juan Soto, there's not going to be that pressure to like be the best player and be the biggest leader on the team. I think he comes in, he can be himself. There's already a culture in place, and he can be additive to that. I think, if he wants to speak, I mean, of course he's going to speak, but I think at the same time, not having to be the guy might be appealing. I think sometimes we put a lot of pressure on the best players to also be the clubhouse leader, and it's not necessarily the same skill set. I've played with guys who are superstars that they're much more suited to just be a member of the team and play their game. And I've played with guys that, maybe weren't superstars, but they had a really good leadership skill set, within them. So one thing about, the Mets clubhouse that I've been a part of is that stuff's going to happen organically. And I think that's the way to go.
Who was the best leader you ever played with? I know. And before you answer that, Adam, like, here's my take on leadership. Okay, this goes back to putting C's on uniforms, which I think in baseball is really hard to do, because for me, and please tell me if I'm full of hooey. It's fine. But I always like, baseball is a thing where you have so many different elements of a clubhouse, right?
Yeah.
And you also have a lot of language elements to a clubhouse. So it's not like here, the guy in the middle of the room on the Rudy stool, yeah, every single time. You have to have leaders in different. Probably there was, you were a leader in the bullpen. There was a leader in the starting staff. There was maybe even a leader on the bench, a utility guy. I don't know but baseball is different that way, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've played a lot of places, and so I've played with a lot of guys that I would consider great leaders. And certainly they come in all different shapes and forms. I mean, like you just said, the bullpen's kind of its own little platoon. So there's leaders down there as well, even though you're kind of separated from the team and you're in your own little bubble. But I guess guys that jump out to me right away, Aaron Judge, Brett Gardner with the Yankees. Those two I thought were excellent. With the Red Sox, I thought Nathan Eovaldi, Xander, I thought was a pretty good leader. With the Rockies, Carlos Gonzalez was amazing at kind of tying the whole clubhouse together, Latinos, Americans, kind of being all in harmony, which I think is a big deal, not being too cliquey and separated in there. With the Mets, I think Francisco's really, really good. But also like Sean Manaea is another one I would give credit to, just somebody that his leadership style is more like making everybody understand that we're a family and kind of showing everybody love all the time and supporting and just being so genuine in that, that I think that really brings people into the right mindset, that group mindset as the season progresses, that you really are all in this together. Because the game can be an individual game at times, but as the season progresses, you really do need to come together as a group. So a guy like that is a big deal.
Well, you're sort of going to help me morph into our conversation about, the evolution of 2024 going the evolution 2025. Because you look at the Mets and what they did with the starting pitchers, right? And getting these guys shorter term deals. I'm talking about starters and getting the most out of them, trying to tweak this and tweak that, and then boom. But then they're sort of seemingly doing the same thing heading into 2025. But you mentioned Manaea is also that's paying for some certainty, and there's no such thing as certainty. I get it, but why you're doing all this other stuff? Why you're getting all these other guys trying to capture that lightning in the bottle and you have a better perspective of what they did and what they prioritized and how they tried to get the most out of these guys. But then you're sitting there with, again, paying for some semblance of certainty around it. Yeah. So, but again, you have a better perspective of what the Mets did in terms of this approach. Because it's one thing to say, David Stern, hey, good job. You identified these guys. You get them on their deals. Good for you. But there is sort of, okay, now coaches, now environment, now all of it. Now you have to be good in order for this to work. It was a little bit different, and it worked.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, particularly with Sean, Manaea, and with Severino, I think those guys were such good signings in part because they were getting guys that had struggled a little bit in the near term, but had track records and were extremely hungry to get back to a top level. Both of them had trained at Driveline a bit in the past offseason, so they were already in the process of, evolving as pitchers and they already were headed in the right direction. And then what the Mets have, in their pitching department between Jeremy Hefner and Eric Jagers and some of the other guys that work there, they have a really good group that can take that information of what those guys were already working on and continue to harvest that throughout spring training and into the season and continue to tweak as they go. And I thought it paid huge dividends for them with those two guys last year. I think it's one of those things where it's not always going to work. You're not always going to hit on everybody just because they go to the Mets. Mets have really good, coaches in place, but you're alone out there on the mound. So at the end of the day, it is still up to the player. The Mets and a lot of teams now have really great systems in place to, put people in positions to succeed and continue to help them in their progress. But I think that, the overall strategy, you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. And it'll be interesting to see how it goes this year with Montas and with the conversion of Holmes. Obviously, there's some things within their pitch mix that the Mets are definitely banking on, for this season. But it'll be interesting to see what their batting average is with these guys, because it's definitely a different approach. They didn't dip their toes into the Max Fried or the Corbin Burns, who are more, quote unquote, sure things. So, I'm fascinated to see how it plays out this year for sure.
So again, I'm expertly morphing into the what you saw in 2024, how things evolved, because a lot of things did evolve. I mean, I was talking about this, Adam, things that we didn't think would happen. Let's say this time last year, we didn't think that Netflix would be having NFL games on Christmas, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a crap load of stuff that we didn't think would happen in baseball in terms of the evolution of pitching. Obviously the injuries became a big thing. We've talked about that, but the approach, who would have ever thought that there would be so many, that relievers would throw more innings than starters in the postseason? I mean, no, I don't think anybody woke up at the end of December 2023 and said that was going to happen. So for you, what are some of the things that you look back at this past year? Because again, you're a perfect person to do this because you're so mindful of where everything in pitching is going. What are some of the things that jump to mind for you that evolved or changed over the last year?
Well, a lot of the things that I saw come to fruition this year have been kind of brewing the previous couple years. Everybody's arsenals are so much more expanded now than they were, even say 3-4 years ago. I mean, you got relievers throwing 4 or 5 pitches. Guys who are super nasty with 2 pitches are still looking to add a 3rd and a 4th pitch. So That's the biggest thing that jumps to mind is just how easy it is to learn pitches now, which is a little bit dangerous, but it's also, you see the reward. All of a sudden you're a 4-pitch guy instead of a 2-pitch guy, and now you can maybe convert back to starter. Teams are more open to that because they see that you have the weaponry to face an order more than one time, and that ability is at such a premium. So to me, like, it's the player development, the individual player development, and the ability to get tangibly better a lot quicker than we ever could before. I think this last year was the first year that became obvious that that's going on. Seth Lugo finishing, I believe, third or fourth in the Cy Young. Michael King took a huge step forward. He was the game 1 starter in the playoffs for the Padres. The way Manaea jumped up. I mean, really, it's all over the league. Guys got tangibly better. And a lot of that was adding pitches to their arsenal, becoming more well-rounded. And I just think that the incentives have sort of started to align where guys realize that, you're going to get paid a lot more money if you can start games and pitch more innings. So even as a reliever who is a successful guy, maybe you're going to push to become more of a well-rounded guy to get more opportunity that you want, financially. And I also think, teams are so desperate to have as many of those guys as possible that they're pushing to develop guys in the same way, even at the minor league level. Like, they want guys to be as well-rounded as possible. So I think this was kind of the first season where we saw that all start to come to fruition. And I think it's just going to continue to go that direction. The league and the game is going to continue to now benefit pitchers who are more complete. The guys who are just one-trick ponies are kind of going to fall by the wayside. I think the rules are going to continue to ensure that. I think they're going to limit roster size as we move forward. They're probably going to shrink the zone a little bit. They're going to continue to do things to help the run scoring environment. Mm-hmm. And the only way to combat that with pitchers is to be able to do kind of a little bit of everything out there. And so we've gotten back to that now. And I think it's full steam ahead with that type of thing going forward.
Well, it's interesting because, there's you're right. I think that you're absolutely right. But at the same time, it's does that translate into being starters, or does that translate into being bulk guys? Almost like the bulk guys have almost become like you said, the pitchers want to do that because they see this is where the value is. The teams almost say, well, listen, we want you to do that, but really that's going to be a 3-inning guy, maybe a 4-inning guy, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both. I think to get before we even get to the playoff situation, you have to get there first. And no matter what you do, you have an awful lot of innings to cover. And so the more they can have a great pitcher out there, the higher percentage of the time a team can deploy a great pitcher out there, the better. And if that's a guy that can go 3 innings at a clip, great. If that's a guy that can go 1 inning at a clip, that's okay. But it's going to be a little harder, to get to the finish line the way they want to. So you're going to look for more bulk guys, more starters, and just, really finding out what the maximum that an individual can give you at a high level. And once they reach that point where now the returns are diminished, then they'll probably keep them right where they are. I mean, some guys aren't made to pitch 5 innings, with what they've got going on. But I think now we're in more of the find out case because every team, it's really a group effort and it's a war of attrition to get to the playoffs. And then once you're in the playoffs, then you can manage kind of what you got.
Well, we saw that, right?
A la Dave Roberts. Yeah. I mean,
right.
He did a great job this year. Because at that point it's a trust game. You get there, but then once you're in the playoffs, it's who can I trust? Who's pitching well right now? Who's going to get the outs right now? And you piece it together from there. But it's a totally different calculus than staring the 162 in your face, prior to that.
Well, so I mean, a lot of things are permeating here, but and when you're saying the trust thing, the immediate one that came to the Blake Trinan couple innings in the World Series, it's like, who do I trust? Well, I know we're running out of guys, but I trust this guy pitching into the 40s. 40 pitch something like that. You're right. I mean, that is, the playoffs are just different. But another thing that's been surfaced is sort of the 6-man rotation thing. And like you said, all of it is to get to where you want to go, right? Which is the playoffs. Do you think this 6-man rotation, like, do you think that is ultimately going to be more of a thing? I don't think it'll be like, here's our 6-man rotation over 162. But you're hearing it more and more and more and more from teams for that exact reason, to get to the finish line. Do you think that'll become a thing?
Yeah, I mean, it already is a thing. I think it'll be more used by other teams. It's just sort of like a if you need to. It's not easy to have 5 guys take the ball every 5th day for 6 months, and then also be ready to do their thing in the playoffs. I think depending on where you are in the standings and what your personnel is, 6-man rotation is an option, and people are going to use it at times to give their big boys a little bit more of a blow during the season. So make sure that their performance stays where they want to. Obviously, when you get overworked, your performance starts to dip a little bit. So you're always trying to find that line of like, I want my best guys out there as much as possible, but not over that point where their performance starts to dip. So 6-man rotation is just a tool that can be used, when it makes sense for the group. And I think more and more teams are going to do that. Obviously the influx of Japanese players who are used to the 6-man rotation coming in is going to lend itself to that. I know with the Mets, with Senga, there was a real resistance to pitch him on 5 days, for a while until he got comfortable here. So it was kind of out of necessity that they would go to the 6-man, and then they can kind of use their options to kind of send a pitcher down, get a reliever when you need one, send a reliever down, get another starter when you need one. And you kind of use that holistic approach, to get through it. And whether it's 5, 6, 7-man rotation at times, teams are just going to do what it takes and what they think is best for the team.
Yeah, what's amazing is in terms of getting to the finish line, I look back 2 years ago, Zach Gallen total pitched over 240 innings.
Yeah.
This year in the World Series, the pitcher who had pitched the most innings, I think, was Carlos Rondon, and it was like 189. It was, and I think that, Manaea repped up over 200 at the very end. Like, this is, what I'm saying is this is speaking to exactly what you're talking about. I mean, the Gallen thing, I think, was going to be such an aberration going forward. I just don't know if we're going to see that again, for a lot of reasons. But yeah, a lot of those numbers sort of stunned me, to be honest with you.
Well, sometimes you're in a situation where you have like a real ace, like a Zach Gallen, and he's having a great season, and he's not tired, he's not hurt, so you're going to keep riding him, and you're a borderline playoff team anyway. They were a wild card team to begin with. They just snuck in there, so you're not really planning necessarily for the future. You're still trying to get to the finish line and get your foot in the door. So you need Zach Gallen pitching as many innings as you can. All of a sudden, you're in the playoffs, and now you got to win, and the way you win is having Zach Gallen on the mound. So.
Right.
Unfortunately, his workload, is going to go into that heroic territory, that Madison Bumgarner territory.
Yeah. Well, he said, Adam, not to interrupt, but he said, when I sat down with him, he said, honestly, it was more mental than physical. It's like mentally, it's I don't know if you know this, it's a long season. It's a long, I mean, you want it to be a long season, but holy crap. Yeah. When he said that, it was, all right, I get that. He's like, I didn't want to, everything was done, when the World Series was done that year, I didn't get off the couch for 2 weeks. So, and you felt that as a reliever, I would imagine. This is different because of all the things if you do a compilation of all the things we're talking about, here's the takeaway. It's exhausting.
It is. It's totally exhausting. And I've been in that exact same spot, pitching deep into the playoffs, pitching every game of the playoff run after a 75 game, season, appearance season. And then, you don't have the luxury of taking a pause, like when you're in the playoff run. You just have to say, I'll deal with it later. And then you let all that exhaustion kind of out as soon as you are done. Hopefully it's with a ring, but sometimes it's not. And, you just have to say that I gave it everything I got. And that's just kind of the job,
Well, and the last thing is in terms of along the lines of what might happen in trying to not fix things, but manage things. There was a report that came out that Manfred was talking about this starting pitchers. And I think this was framed terribly. It was starting pitchers have to pitch 5 or I think 6 innings or whatever it was. And everyone was like, what are you talking about? Have to? Like, you can't say someone has to do this. And it all comes back to the trying to put the genie back in the bottle about pitchers throwing too hard, injuries, and all of that. I don't know. You're an avid listener of the podcast. I appreciate it. Brian Bannister came on and he had surfaced the idea of, well, okay, if a pitcher doesn't do that, then maybe you lose a DH later in the game. All right. Okay. All of it comes back to trying to put the genie back in the bottle in terms of having pitchers not just do all the things that we're talking about, just come out and just gas it from minute one and then blow out. I don't know what your perspective of that is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's partly to discourage pitchers from burning it out, but I think a lot of it is to discourage the decision making. To change the decision making of the analysts within the team to maybe pull a pitcher just because the third time through the order's coming up, and he's only had 75 pitches, but the expected. The ex-WOBA of this next matchup favors a reliever I have in the bullpen, and he's fresh. I think it's really just trying to get back to that original entertainment value of starter versus starter kind of dueling. As a kid going down to the mini mart and picking up the New York Post or Daily News, I would flip to the back and I would look at the pitching matchups, and that's part of what would get me excited about the games that night. Clemens versus Martinez, or Glavine versus Leiter, somebody like that. That's kind of, to me, a huge entertainment value of baseball and a big reason why a lot of people would tune in. And now a lot of times you see pitchers where they're not going to let them go, and it's really going to be a battle of 5 or 6 pitchers versus another 5 or 6 pitchers. I just think that's a little less interesting as an entertainment product, and so ultimately I think that's kind of the problem they're trying to solve. I do like the idea of the DH being tied to the pitcher going a little deeper, because losing your DH tangibly hurts your offense. And so therefore the calculus that the analysts are doing might be a little bit different, and it could persuade a manager to leave a starter in a little longer, which in turn maybe gives the fans what they want. So I don't know. I mean, none of these things have happened yet, but I like the ideas behind them.
Yeah, I when he said that, like I said, okay, to your point, I can get around this a little bit. So last thing in terms of 2025, is there anything that you think looking forward that you say, okay, this is, or is it just more going to be sort of more of the things that we're talking about, just evolving, or anything that, you think is we're going to be sitting here a year from now saying, oh, we didn't expect that. If not, that's okay.
Nothing really jumps to mind like huge. I do think we're just going to continue to see, the game continue to just evolve at a rapid pace. The hitters with the traject machines, the pitchers, learning new pitches on the fly, teams really understanding how to use the option system that's in place now. And I just think, if it's just going to get more and more efficient, like the teams are getting more and more efficient of how to deploy, their firepower. I think that we might get to a tipping point towards the end of this year where the players maybe wake up and realize a little bit that maybe some of the stuff that we're doing isn't player friendly. But at the same time, there's not really any stopping it until we hit some sort of, big moment, because as I saw this year, for the majority of guys, they have no choice but to continue to go out there and do what the team's asking of them. Otherwise, they're going to be gone. So I think, baseball is going to be really, really good again this year, and it's going to, the players are better than ever. But I can't say that there's any one thing that I think will be drastically different, just kind of more of the same, but on that upward trajectory of just, hyper efficiency and just really, really amazing physical attributes.
Well, don't say that to Cam Newton. So, I mean, we talked about this the other day. Obviously, people missed it. Cam Newton, listen, I mean, it is what it is. Cam Newton says baseball's dead and WNBA is going to take over. I say I applaud. Lacrosse, soccer, sport of the future, always will be. But baseball, you can't take away baseball. You just said baseball's going to be really, really good. It was really, really good. We can pick
really,
through this.
good.
Baseball's really, really good. A guy signed a contract who's probably going to be for $800 million. It's okay. Baseball's really, really good. That's what I get a tattoo. Says baseball isn't boring. Right?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, honestly, the players are amazing. The product is really, really good right now. I think that the pitch clock made a big difference. I think some of the things, to Manfred's credit, that he's done have been beneficial. But I do think that people who I mean, like Cam Newton probably never really watched baseball to begin with, so it's easy to say it's dead if you're not really into it. But I was in packed ballparks all summer. There was a lot of people, a lot of interest in baseball. Everywhere I go, people want to ask me about the Mets or Yankees or Red Sox or any teams I've been with. There's a lot of interest out there in the streets about baseball, and I think it's still the best game in the world. And I mean, it's probably never been played at a higher level.
Can I tell you what I got my Baseball's and Boring tattoo? There's certain people with tattoo. I always think about, obviously it's a huge commitment, as you have followed, right? This isn't done lightly. You have, how many tattoos you have?
Only like 5.
But they're all like super, super creative and impactful, I think. Right?
Yeah, I mean, they're small. I got them all in like one time period when I was younger. They're mostly baseball related. But yeah.
All right. Well, you're always welcome to. You could be the third person to have a Baseball's and Boring tattoo if you want. So, but that's okay. Hey, listen, I appreciate all that you do once again, and anytime you want to talk about anything, you're always welcome. So, Adam, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Rob. Thanks.